You are listening to Action Design, your monthly insight into the field of behavioral economics and its applications to the world around us. We bring you leading practitioners from all industries to discuss cutting-edge behavioral research and how to practically apply those concepts to the development of consumer products and public policy.
Hello, Action Designers, and welcome to another episode of Action Design Radio. I'm one of your hosts, Zarak Khan. With me, as always, Eric Johnson.
Hello, everyone. Great to see you again.
Eric, how are you doing today?
I am doing pretty good. I'm doing good.
How do you feel about the idea of a little bit of banter at the top of this episode?
I always love banter, you know me.
Well, I was thinking about this the other day because I saw a bunch of reading lists come out, and I'm always interested in what other people are reading, so I was curious as to what you're reading these days.
What am I reading these days? So the main book that I'm getting close to being done with is Alchemy by Rory Sutherland of Ogilvy on the UK. It's kind of about it's about behavioral science in a little more like applied manner. I would say it's really, really good. It's one of my favorite books. I've read the topic in a long time. So I'm reading through that. I also just started Fooled by Randomness by Nassim Taleb. Just kind of about like how we identify patterns, statistics, things like that. I'm pretty early in that, but that's pretty good. And then I usually have an audiobook in the rotation, and the audiobook that I've been listening to recently is Hatching Twitter. It's about how Twitter came to be, and it's pretty interesting so far.
Who wrote that one?
Nick Bilton. He's kind of like a technology reporter, I think. He's written a couple of good books on kind of tech and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's mildly interesting, especially if you use Twitter, I suppose.
Yeah, right. Cool.
How about you? What books are in your rotations, Rock? I'll expand and say that my reading styles usually have like many books kind of happening at once that I kind of pick up occasionally. Some I stop picking up after I feel like I've gotten the message. Some I keep going on, but it's sort of piecemeal. It's my reading strategy. Yeah,
I'm actually very much the same way. And then it's also kind of funny that you're reading Alchemy because I'm reading Ogilvy on advertising.
I read that a little earlier this year, actually. Yeah.
Super interesting. Like, it's crazy how many, like, some things are obviously like very dated now, but then some of them you can sort of see like how it would apply to, like, you know, in like internet age or whatever. But some of it's just still very true, especially on like the management side of things, I think. And then I read two great books recently. My boss gave me a book called Florida, because I'm from Florida. And it's a bunch of short stories by Lauren Groff. And I loved it so much that I read another one of her books called Fates and Furies. So both of those are fiction. And Fates and Furies is a novel. And so I would highly recommend both of those. And her in general, Lauren Groff. She was great. That's funny that you're doing the Ogilvy thing as well.
Yeah.
Cool. I feel good about this banter.
It's good banter. Yeah. Maybe our guest can talk about what he's reading if he feels up to it. This is a little bit of a surprise question.
I am also very curious to hear what our guest is reading. So let me introduce him real quick. So our esteemed guest this episode is Chris Nave. So Chris is the associate director of the Master of Behavioral and Decision Sciences program at the University of Pennsylvania. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
And what are you reading these days?
Oh, I was afraid you asked, actually. I don't, I haven't done a whole lot of
applications for people trying to come to the program?
That's right. My spare time, I don't.
Yeah, you don't have to limit your reading list to books. Any text will do.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, applications. I actually have been reading a couple popular books. So I finished, sadly, The Nightingale. And so that's really not behavioral science. I try to actually avoid anything that I'm doing on the train is try to kind of get away from academia, read some of the popular fiction that's out there. I do like to check, I would say my go-to is anythingbehavioralscientist.com. I love reading anything that Evan and Elizabeth and that group kind of bring out. It tends to be long enough to like hold my attention, and I feel like I've learned something out of it, but not so long that I can't stop reading it. So
Yeah,
Awesome.
and they just put out a great like summer reading list too. So
Yeah, the reading list is awesome, and Elizabeth just put out a really cool article on like why we ask questions or don't ask questions. When we don't know something, and what some of the issues in play, and how we don't speak up when maybe we should speak up. It's a really great piece.
They put out so much good stuff. I feel like I'm always behind on it. I'm just like, oh, there's so many articles on there I need to read.
I agree. Like I know. Like I feel like anytime I can go on there and pick something up, and I still have lots more to read, but there's always something there that I can get immersed in.
Yeah.
I save them all to Pocket, and then I read them when I'm on flights. Is my strategy for that.
So that used to be my strategy, but I found I would just pocket stuff and then forget about it and never go back to it. So. Yeah.
Well, that's why the flight is the key part there. You have to make sure you have downloaded it before you get on the plane.
See, I always do books. I like to do books on the plane. That's why I like to really crush a book. But that's also a good strategy. Right. Anyway, we should probably not get too far off topic here.
So the reason that Chris is joining us today is because we've been like talking about for a while, like kind of how to get into behavioral science. So we've talked to some people who were like starting their career in behavioral science. We had an episode last year with Elizabeth Kim, where she kind of talked about her journey into the field. We typically ask our guests like how their advice for people. And now more and more there are like sort of more formal avenues to get into behavioral science. So we thought for this conversation and a number of the sort of upcoming conversations that we're going to have, we kind of wanted to sort of give what we thought was kind of a sample of what's out there that's somewhere in between like a 2-day workshop and getting a PhD. So Chris is the associate director of this master's program. We'll also chat with folks about like kind of a longer sort of training, like boot camp, like a 10-week boot camp, as well as sort of like internal education within an organization. So those aren't like necessarily endorsements from Action Design Network of like these programs, but we think that they represent sort of a middle ground, and just want to give folks an idea of different like opportunities and paths to kind of training that can lead them into behavioral science or roles that incorporate behavioral science. So with that kind of preamble, Chris, maybe can you tell us a little bit about yourself, and also just like kind of what the MBDS program is? Sure.
So I have my PhD in personality and social psychology, and I actually started off on the tenure track as assistant professor. I was at Rutgers. I was teaching stats and personality psych and IO, industrial organizational psychology, to mainly undergrads and master's level students. And a lot of the work that I did that I got really fascinated by was human behavior, why people do what they do. I was that person that would love to kind of watch at coffee shop. I couldn't ever get work done at a coffee shop because I'm watching what people are doing and how they're interacting and seeing what's going on. I'm the one at the talk that's probably paying a little bit less attention to what they're saying and more on what's the audience's reaction and who's really getting into it and who isn't. Early in my training, I realized that psychology, for its many benefits, had this horrible problem with they were studying questionnaires and correlating it to other questionnaires and saying they understood human behavior. And when you look at the research that comes out of traditional psychology, most of the work is questionnaires correlated with questionnaires. And so I started off being very ambitious, trying to study and research directly observed behavior and watching what people actually did. And we had teams of students kind of coding and watching and breaking down videos and seeing what was going on. At that same time, I was directing a master's program at Rutgers, and things happened with my tenure process. I was deemed too collaborative and not programmatic enough, and so I didn't get tenure. But the same day that I found out I didn't get tenure, Penn's position open for directing their brand new, soon-to-be created behavioral decision science program. And I was known to be a bit innovative in some of the work that we were doing in the master's program at Rutgers and attracting funding and creating new courseworks and things. And so that landed, and I kind of knew I had a place to land when I found out that I didn't get tenure. And so I really stumbled on behavioral science. I didn't even know it really existed at the time 2 years ago. And I found out like what a really cool place to be, coming from academia where there's a lot of silos and people don't communicate and talk to each other. And behavioral science can really be this like the best of information and work from economics, behavioral economics, psychology, political science, and so forth. So, with that mindset that we have so much to learn from all these different disciplines and bringing them together and helping inform decision-making and better understanding sustainable behavior change, that's kind of our perspective for how we're kind of growing and iterating in this behavior and decision science program at Penn. So it's new. We have our third cohort joining us in the fall. It's a really diverse group of students from all over the world. Our third cohort, I think, is coming from 16 or 17 different countries. They're split pretty evenly in terms of like male, female, industry, coming from industry or coming straight out of undergrad, international and domestic students. And so it's a really wide variability, which I think is a tremendous asset to a program like us and in a newer field. But also raises a lot of challenges and opportunities for kind of growth and improvement when you're catering to such a widely variable student population.
So when you were like setting up this program, we can talk about the mechanics of it in a little bit. What was sort of like, to the extent that like what was like the impetus to say like we should have a program like this, and then do you know kind of like what the thought was in terms of like actually how it was set up?
Yeah, good question. I think all credit goes to our faculty director, Christina Bicchieri, and her, and there's a judgment and decision group at Penn, and from what I gather, they found themselves going to many of the same colloquium across campus. Through different departments. So sometimes economics would host a really interesting talk, or the decision science team, the management team at Wharton would have a really good talk. And this group of faculty kept finding themselves going to these same talks, fascinated by the decision making and behavior change. And they realized how great it would be to kind of form a program where they could bring in, they could have really cool programming and bring in speakers kind of around this. And so they would go to these decision-making conferences and everything, and they realized that there really wasn't anything in behavioral science at the master's level in the United States. And what was there tended to be either in a business school, or it might be strictly behavioral economics, or again has a very heavy business or policy emphasis. And so Christina Bicchieri, the vice dean at Penn, Nora Lewis, and several others really did kind of their homework to see what was out there, and realized that this was a really novel opportunity to create an applied, professional master's program in behavioral science. That's emphasis was, it took into account things like nudge, which everybody's aware of, but it also really plays into the strength of our faculty advisor and others on campus, and that's in collective behavior change or social norms, network analysis. So going beyond just nudge, which I think is really, really important for a field to kind of grow and help answer important questions.
So kind of on that note, and talk about what you decided to include, going past nudging and all that sort of stuff. What was the process like, or how do you think about, what topics and what skills, expertise were the most important to include? And how do you kind of refine that? How do you decide what's the most important stuff that students need, and how do you decide, maybe more interestingly, like what doesn't need to be included as part of the curriculum?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think number one, understanding that we're constantly iterating. I think we're still kind of in startup mode. From our curriculum and what we've been doing in our first cohort to what we're going to be doing in our third cohort, it's changed dramatically already. And we're excited that we have that kind of flexibility that Penn and our infrastructure, our faculty, and our alums, our advisory board have allowed us this kind of creativity and flexibility. And so reminding ourselves that we are a professional program and that there should be skill sets that students should be leaving with a portfolio, a set of knowledge and skills that they can bring in. One of which absolutely is critical is anything related to measurement, evaluation, assessment, experimental design. design. We think that those are by far the most transferable. Those are skills that you can bring into any research question, and you can really help a company, or an organization or a nonprofit better understand kind of what's going on, helping them create or design better interventions or questionnaires to kind of get at what's important. So I think that's key. Through our iteration, making sure that they get the judgments and decisions training, so understanding heuristics and biases and the complications behind it. We knew that had to be a big key. We definitely knew that the collective behavior change, that we had to move to go beyond just nudge and some of the individual approaches to behavior change. We through talking to our advisory board and students and really looking at job ads that are out there, we realized we needed something like a data science class. And not to be under this illusion that students could become data scientists after one course. But what we got really excited in developing was a translational class, translating what data scientists do. Most companies tend to have gone all in on data science, and they employ one or more or a team of data scientists that can extract data. But what tends to be a problem is turning all of that data that they have into something actionable, turning it into an intervention, or reducing it to the bare essentials. And we really worked to design a data science class that could help students with those skill sets. And so we have them doing things like data camp and like actually, going in and handling real data and processing it and going through it and interpreting output. Having projects that they can show as part of their portfolio. So we knew that was important. In terms of things that we decided to maybe like leave out or maybe leave optional, I think the fact that we're positioned in the School of Arts and Sciences is really strategic. We're not kind of forcing all students to have business classes or marketing classes or management classes or finance classes. Those are optional classes that they can specialize in as part of their elective process. But we want behavioral science to be broader in their training, and if they want to go more policy-oriented or health-focused, management-focused, if they want to go more tech-oriented, they have that flexibility in a broader School of Arts and Science-based program.
Awesome. So kind of follow up on some of that content, I think it's interesting how much you emphasized like the experiment aspect, the measurement, and even like the data literacy, if you will, aspect. And it seems like that's a pretty good portion of the content, maybe more than people would expect compared to understanding like the judgment decision-making concepts. So like, I'm curious, is like an outcome of that, or do people come out of the program and are they really, because you mentioned for like the data science aspect, it's not necessarily they are a data scientist, but they're like comfortable with that language and they have some hands-on experience. Do you feel like people come out ready to kind of run their own experiments and maybe even be sort of an internal researcher in a way, or is it kind of more of giving that understanding of like, this is how you can apply that in these other roles you might take on within a company? Because I found that interesting, and just looking at the way people work in this field, is that some people are very much just kind of conceptual and more just, work in marketing, design, things like that, but they might lack some of the statistical fluency, things like that. Or some people are very much in just the research data realm as behavioral scientists. It sounds like a dip toes in a little bit of both. And is there kind of one direction that people end up sort of being in, or do they kind of just come out with well-rounded aspects of both?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think our students aren't coming in as a blank slate, and so we opted to not kind of force these concentrations that students would like have to pick and take certain classes for their electives, for the reason that students don't come in as a blank slate. So we have some that come in with very strong quantitative skills already, that they want to get more contextual information. They want the theories behind why we do what we do and why these certain decision-making heuristics work better or they don't work. So some students are very strong and skilled in the quantitative domains already, and others aren't. I think we've been establishing some what should an MBDS student have, like when they leave, if what should a graduate be able to do? In the very least, be able to understand empirical research articles and be able to translate them for a wider audience, to help steer executives and those in business towards certain empirical articles and away from other articles, helping them translate it into something that they could turn it into actionable. I think some of our students will certainly be able to run their own research studies. I mean, part of the curriculum is that they're doing group projects from beginning to completion. They use MTurk and Qualtrics, and they're going through using R. A lot of them, most of our students are doing design challenges and and doing well on those. But it's hard, and I think people underestimate how really difficult it is to be a researcher, to conduct research. There's a really, really great blog out there by Sanjay Srivastava that's called The Hardest Science and studies human behavior. And I think it's absolutely spot on. And what I worry about is we don't want behavioral science to be kind of a fad where people think it's super easy to change behavior with a really simple nudge and you can do it sustainably. What we want them to know is that it's hard. It's hard to write really good questionnaires. It's hard to run randomized controlled trials. It's hard to interpret data. We need to be a little patient. We need to pick and choose our battles. And so if our students can have, a great literacy in these different topics, and they realize how difficult and challenging, they can help get the ground running. They can be a part of a team to do research projects. I think then we've done well. I do think a number of them will be capable of running studies from beginning to end in all phases. I think a number of our other students will be able to have expertise or skills in many of the domains, but maybe not all of them. So maybe they're helping with the literature review, they're helping pick the right measures, they're helping identify the right variables and the power of the study, and maybe they have a team that's analyzing the data appropriately or modeling the data after the fact appropriately. Maybe they come back in on the project and they're interpreting it, summarizing it. What's the one page? What are the set of deliverables from this project? And those, I think, is kind of more realistic for what master's level students, I think, can do.
So, I mean, one of the things that I can't remember if we've mentioned this already, but it's a 1-year program. And so, thinking about, not just like that it's a master's program and sort of like master's level, but like what you're able to sort of like kind of ingest and accomplish, like, and sort of like kind of test out within that year, I think it's like interesting to think about. And so, I'm kind of curious to get your take on sort of like what the experience is from like the student's perspective, and that's either just based on things that they've told you or kind of from your observations. I mean, they've found it interesting. They think the topic's interesting. They are looking for an avenue. They maybe see like one of your webinars or some, find you at a conference or something, and they've been like accepted into the program. And then like sort of what is it? What's like the structure like from there for them in terms of like their kind of progression through the program, knowing that they can sort of choose sort of a variety of different paths, or that there's like lots of options for them in terms of how they can kind of customize it for themselves. Sure.
So, the majority of our students opt for the 1 calendar year path. And the 1 calendar year path is, everybody joins in the fall. We have a cohort model, so we only start in the fall. Everybody starts, even those that may go end up part-time. I would say 80%, 85% are going the 1 calendar year route. They take 4 classes in the fall, and then taking 4 in the spring, and they complete a capstone project over the summer months. There is a subset that take longer. They can take 2 years or more. They go either part-time because they're working, or they're a Penn employee, or they want to kind of marinate in the system, I guess, a little bit longer. And so there's that kind of option that a minority kind of do. It's because it's very cohort based. We try to find additional ways of adding value. So we try to do these kind of get-togethers. We have these mandatory professional development meetings that we're kicking around right now. I think we're doing every Friday, most Fridays. And it's a way of getting the cohort to get to know each other, but also bringing in people in behavioral science that kind of help mentor the students and help them see kind of what's out there, what some of the challenges and opportunities are going into behavioral science in various domains. Because of feedback that students gave us, we created new design challenges this year to get them kind of involved in teamwork and really building on their skill sets that they have and their complementing skill sets to help solve problems that companies have in a variety of domains. And so, we're constantly thinking of ways that our students can kind of, get additional value out of just the classes they're taking. It's demanding. It's hard to take 4 classes and balance other things in life at once, especially if you've been out of school for a while. So we have some people that are coming back after 5, 10, 15 or more years being in the industry, and it's can be challenging. I mean, I think for different ways. Some of our undergrads that come into the program, they're so hyper-focused on needing to get a perfect score, A, being the absolute best student, that I think to their detriment, they may not be going to see all of the amazing talks on campus. They may be more reluctant to do design challenges and other kinds of things because they're so focused on being really good students. Our professionals, those that are coming from industry, I think they're trying to soak in as much as they can in their brief time with us at Penn. So they're getting involved in all different organizations and doing design challenges and everything. But it's tricky figuring out that right balance of how do I write research papers and reports and how do I balance it all at the same time. And so it's definitely a challenge. It's a very rigorous program to do in one calendar year.
So kind of that note of how you're saying you're like evaluating things, I was kind of curious, like obviously with behavioral science, applied behavioral science, especially like the way you're teaching students, like experimental, measuring things, iterating on them. How do you think of like iteration as far as the program and like evaluating what's working, what you want to add? How do you think about iterating and improving it over time and sort of, is there a way to even like really kind of measure that, or is it just kind of feedback from students, like see the outcomes they're getting, stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's analogous to like how to be a good behavioral scientist or a good researcher is being multi-method and like really thinking all the different ways that you can collect data to better understand what you're doing and are you doing it well. And I think being of the mindset that there's always room for improvement is key as well. And so that can help you really look in places that you may not want. Sometimes you may not want to look, so that you can get a better feel for where things are at. So we look at a variety of indices. It could be as simple as GPA. How are our students faring? Like, are our students that have been away from academia for a while and are coming back, are they successful at an Ivy League in this rigorous programming for a year? So that can be one measure that we certainly look at. We call ourselves an interdisciplinary program. We say that students can take classes everywhere on campus. Are they actually taking classes everywhere on campus? And so we conduct evaluations and we see. And so, for example, this last year we had students take classes across 10 different colleges across the university. We had 80 or 90 unique classes all over campus, which kind of validates that assumption that, yes, they're treating this as an interdisciplinary program. We get feedback, both internal program level and university level feedback on the students in terms of the instructors and the class, how foundational are the topics that we're giving them, what might be missing, what kind of sequencing should we be having for the core classes? Should we be doing more industry outreach or more project-based learning? And so that's very key. But I think on the other end, having a robust advisory board, so being able to talk to people, like you and Zarak and others that are out there in that space that are behavioral scientists that are doing behavioral science and seeing what they do, what skill sets they think are important, factoring that in with the student demand and factoring that in with students, with faculty, with what our faculty are saying is important. Getting all of that information and then kind of sorting through it and helping refine the curriculum is, I think really, really key. We're seeing outcomes. Who's getting hired? How are they getting hired? What skill sets do they have? So we're building a database, being in such a small sample of 2 cohorts graduated, not even 2 cohorts graduated. We're building a robust database so we can see what's going on and where can we get better.
So, I mean, I would imagine that part of it is sort of you figuring out how to improve the program or, adapt the program to be the best that it can be and serve this population the best. And then part of it is also figuring out who the best people are to join, right? So when you're admitting people or when you're marketing to folks. So, as you have been thinking about it or kind of going forward, who do you think that this program is good for?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's I would say it's so hard to be prescriptive at this stage because I have learned so much about how people want to use this degree for things, whether it's being a minor league baseball scout, to being the head of the Interior Ministry of Health in a foreign country and learning evidence-based practices to bring back to being a doctor, to opening up restaurants for celebrity chefs, to working in law and scrutinizing the decision-making process of trials. These different goals.
Could you introduce us to all them for future podcasts? Those sound like great guests.
Right? Yes, they have amazing stories. That's my favorite awesome. Part of the job is like learning why people are interested in the program in behavioral science. So absolutely. I think the story is so key. I mean, because the field of behavioral science is it's getting better in terms of how we articulate it. But we need like passionate ambassadors, people that are kind of all in on this field, and people that can articulate that in a personal statement of why this behavioral science is so important and what they intend to do with it. That's crucial for us. We've seen a few students that have wanted to join our program because they can take a lot of electives and maybe they can't get into Wharton's MBA program, and this might be a backdoor way of taking a bunch of Wharton classes or taking classes at an Ivy League, but they don't have a really good understanding of what behavioral science is, so they're not going to be a very good ambassador of behavioral science. What has really I think worked well and is those kind of cheerleaders, those that are really, really excited about the field, that can articulate what skill sets they have and what they need and what they think they want to do with it. And so that's key. We do have prereqs that all students have to come in with at least a statistics class and a microeconomics class. And that seems to be very important to kind of get on the ground running. We give them like Coursera's and some of these like MOOCs and online training that they can do before they come to kind of refresh and get them ready. So they definitely need to have some background, but I haven't noticed any trends yet in terms of like only the quantitative or the economics psych or the psych majors are going to be successful in the program. We have journalism majors and homeland security majors and English majors who are super successful and do really well in kind of articulating why behavioral science is a good fit for them. And that's, I think, the most important thing for us and for the field right now.
So maybe a better way of asking that question is thinking about it in terms of positioned between, kind of like how I sort of set this up at the beginning, and maybe this is too simplistic, but positioned between like what you might see at like a conference or like something like that, where there's like a 2-day workshop, and getting a PhD. There are people who will be trying to decide like, well, what's the best path for me. And it might just be that you don't know yet because there haven't been you only have 2 cohorts that have gone through, but thinking sort of like on that spectrum of options, is there like a way that you kind of position it where you're like, oh, this makes sense for this group because it's more than this sort of short training, but you don't need as much as a PhD, or is that just like sort of a straw man because that's kind of too obvious?
Yeah, no. I think it's tricky, but I think and certainly a master's program is not right for everybody, and so trying to figure out what audience or what segmented group is a master's degree or 1 year residential kind of a program, more appropriate for what kinds of groups. And, and I think, trying to determine how much what you're being tasked to do in your current position, if that's what you're looking to stay in, or if you're looking to pivot into something else, or if you're realizing that what you're doing in your company, you need additional skill sets that can really help round out what you're doing. And if you're going to be using those, if you're going to be doing a lot of either assessment or design or literature searches and backgrounds, if you're expected to be an ideas person, an analyst, a consultant, I think that a master's level program, getting rigorous training through 8 or 9 classes through a year, having a lot of projects, could be a really good path for you. I think those that already have a lot of these established skills and that just kind of need refreshers. I think a lot of these conferences and workshops and some of the 8 to 10 weeks, they might be either higher level executives that need to have an awareness of what's going on, but they don't kind of get into the nitty gritty details, or they need refreshers. They've had some of the training already. They just want to learn some of the new techniques and strategies that are out there. I do think that there's a really interesting debate in the field on whether or not people that lead behavioral science units, or what kinds of training should they have? Should they have PhDs? Is that a mandatory thing that they need? Are they good with master's degrees? Do they even need a master's degree? And I think that that's an important debate to keep having. I think looking at the skill sets and the jobs, what kinds of skills and abilities are needed in these particular positions is really, really important. I think there's no one-size-fits-all approach. I would not say that a master's program like ours is right for everybody or for most people. I never, ever do a hard sell for our type of program or for a master's degree. I really think that the students and the prospective students are very good at finding out information about these different kinds of programs, and if they're really passionate and excited about the curriculum and the opportunities, and they get a chance to talk to our alumni and our current students or our faculty, that can help them really help make a decision on, is this the right path for me?
Yeah, I really like the way you kind of put that it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, and I think we're also sort of figuring this out as kind of a field and what people want to do. Sorry, I think there's a siren going off by me, so I apologize to the listeners. I would mute, but I'm already talking. So, yeah, I've been kind of thinking about this as well, and I think it applies to a lot of fields. Behavioral science feels different to us because it is a pretty new field, and it's a skill set, and as a job, it's still growing and becoming, kind of finding its identity in a lot of ways. But I think it's kind of true for a lot of fields too. I think data science at this point is something that's more established. And some people are good getting a master's in statistics or something that makes them a really rigorous data scientist. Some people just need to take a part-time class or a weekend course to just know how to communicate with the data scientists they work with, or to just have a little bit of fluency to do some things themselves. And it sounds like the way your students coming in, you're seeing a lot of those scenarios, and that some people just are really interested in behavioral science. Some people kind of use it to really enhance what field they're already in. So I think it's interesting to think about those outcomes, and one of the reasons I find this program so interesting is this sort of fills one of those needs, and that if you want that more rigorous year-long kind of master's level education, this creates an opportunity for that. Whereas if you are one of those executives, for example, who just needs a little bit of awareness of it, they can take a workshop or a weekend course or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are multiple levels, and it's really important to kind of, to advance behavioral science, it's important to work together. And so those that are offering the in-house workshops and the executive programs and the longer master's level and PhD programs, that we should all be having dialogue with each other to see, what's going on, what's successful, what's needed, how is it being translated into something useful, so that we can really continue to evolve. The field of behavioral science, it's in many ways, right? It's a newer field, but it's taking elements that have been around forever from established disciplines, and so it's not as if something created totally new and novel. It's just figuring out how best to go about understanding behavior change. And so, talking with all these different groups, I think it's so important. And I think that's a big plug for Action Design and these other groups to keep the conversation going among all of these different levels. Those that are doing the workshops and are just casually reading Nudge and some of these other great books, behavioral scientists, versus those that are getting the PhDs. It's great to come together and talk about behavior.
So, as you're thinking about, I'm assuming you're kind of planning in the midst of planning this third cohort that'll start this fall. What are the things that you're kind of like looking forward to the most? You're most excited about, either changes that you're making or just things that you're sort of, excited for.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a number of them. I think every cohort that kind of comes in has a unique feel and culture to them, and getting to know them and seeing how excited they get. I think at the second cohort compared to the first one, we were able to kind of give them more opportunities to express themselves through committees and subcommittees and help shape things. Whereas in the first year, we just really had to get the curriculum up and running and get ready. I think we have a lot more opportunities. So our program, being lead organizers for Philadelphia's Action Design is really cool, that we can do these meetup events and see people in industry and talk to people that are casually or use behavioral science on a day-to-day basis, that we can have students help organize and create these events and network. I think that's really, really exciting. I think continuing with these design challenges and consulting class that we're going to be doing, really super important that they understand how to take what they learn in the classroom into trying to solve real world problems. And that's hard. And helping our students connect those dots. I think it's great too that we have a couple cohorts that have graduated, and so now we can use their talents and skill sets to help mentor our incoming class. They've landed jobs in behavioral science all over, and they can help, so it's not just the voice of me or our faculty director or those related to the program. It's people in the field and space. I love talking with our advisory board members, the people that are from a variety of different companies that have a lot of excitement and enthusiasm and do really unique and novel things in behavioral science, bringing them to campus and hearing what they're doing and the challenges and opportunities they have for our students and alums to be a part of, I think is tremendously exciting. So I think that's really big, and those are definitely some things that we're especially looking forward to this upcoming year.
Yeah, those are awesome. I think we'll probably have some time here for you to plug a couple of those things as well, obviously Action Design included. Erik, do you have any kind of final thoughts or questions before we kind of move to that?
Man, I could talk about this for hours, but I think the one thing I'll kind of before we cap into some of the stuff is usually one of the last things we try to ask people is just what would you recommend to somebody who is fascinated with this field and looking to make a move, or just trying to get more involved in it? And I think we already touched on that a little bit here, but maybe speak a little bit to your journey and just what you're learning through the course, and just what steps should people take to figure out what's right for them to learn more and get more involved in doing stuff in this field.
Yeah, I think doing your homework. I mean, every few months it feels like that there's additional resources or really great articles or McKinsey reports or People Science and behavioralscientist.com and other places that have really, really great useful resources about behavioral science and what you can do and how behavioral units are created in business. And I think those are really interesting. I think one of the interesting challenges that I'm a little hypersensitive to with our students is there are a few behavioral scientists and chief behavioral officers and behavioral innovation directors out there that lots of people want to learn more about. And doing these one-off informational interviews scares me when we have 70 or 80 students a year, and that's just our program, and they're talking. They want to do these informational one-on-one interviews with people in the space. I don't think that that's terribly sustainable going forward, and finding ways to get people access to these amazing leaders and hearing what they have to say, whether it's through podcasts or their writings, is probably going to be the better way. One of the things that I also instruct them to do is, if you just ask for an informational interview, it's kind of selfish. I mean, you're getting stuff for you. If you can add value to somebody in a conversation, like maybe you read their most recent article that they published, or you listened to their most recent podcast, or you saw them give a talk somewhere, and you have some thoughts or ideas that you wanted to share with them about it, or you had some ideas about next steps, or now you're potentially creating value for that person. And instead of just asking them for their time and learning, about their journey, which they've probably said the same story over and over again, you can have a more dynamic conversation with somebody because you have something to say. Like, you've done your research on them, you've read something cool or seen something that they've done, and you want to interact or talk more on that level. And I think anytime that you can create or network, see somebody at an event and network in that kind of way, it's a more organic and mutually beneficial manner. That's a helpful way going forward.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective too. I don't know. I've gotten so used to informational interviews, I never really thought about it happening any other way.
Always question your priors, Zarak. Always question them.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, I guess with that, like, I want to, I mean, you kind of already did plug Action Design Network in Philly. So yeah, if you're in Philadelphia, Chris and a number of the students that are part of the MBDS program organized the Action Design Philly chapter, which is super cool and exciting and just launched a few months ago. So yeah, I don't know, Chris, if there's any like things you want to plug, or like places people can go to find out more about, the stuff that we've been talking about here, or anything else that you're kind of involved with that you think people should know about.
Yeah, so I mean, I think our Penn MBDS, we have our program where you can get a lot of a website where we can get a lot of information about our curriculum and some stories of our alumni. You can see some of the affiliated faculty and the faculty that teach in our program. We also have Penn MBDS on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, where we try to share some cool updates of, like what kinds of research are the faculty affiliated with us doing? What are our students? What kinds of projects are they a part of? What kinds of jobs are they landing? And so it's a great way of kind of getting involved. We have a meetup page for our Action Design Philadelphia chapter that you can be a part of and see some really cool stuff. We have this really cool health and behavior symposium that we're going to be doing in September. The number of like leading experts, both from academia and industry, that will be talking on a panel, talking about all different kinds of really cool topics in the health space. So, I think that you can stay involved with us in a number of ways through our website, through our social media. So it's a great way.
Awesome. Eric, how about you? Anything that you want to plug?
Nothing to plug at the moment. This is all about the guests. This is the guest time. we plug ourselves enough by doing this, I think. But on that note, so I think that about wraps it up. We're almost at our time here. So, any last thoughts or last things you want to share for the audience before we say goodbye and part ways for now?
I think that it's great to be a part of this. It's really exciting to be a part of behavioral science, and I know that there's a lot of people out there that are curious about human behavior and understanding how to drive sustainable change, and continuing to read and be inquisitive. I think being skeptical, asking questions, don't take things at face value. Really try to get more information about topics is incredibly important, and to really make sure that this field has substance, that we go beyond just talking about some simple basic perspectives and options, that we really kind of dig deep into just how complicated we are and how hard it is to change our behavior, but all the more reason to systematically study it and work together to kind of share and get this information.
Amen.
Couldn't end on a better note than that.
Yeah. Well, in that case, I think we'll wrap it up here for a little bit. So thank you so much for joining us, for taking time out of your day and chatting with us all here, and thanks for all your efforts and putting on the program and for running an action design chapter and all that sort of stuff.
Thanks, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Hey, action designers. So if you enjoyed this episode and you're interested in learning more about master's programs in behavioral science, one place to start, there's lots of information out there, but one place to start would be the Behavioral Economics Guide. So this was published in like June of this year, which is 2019. And so it has a list at the back of master's and PhD programs in behavioral science. So you can kind of see which ones might be near you, or ones that maybe specialize in something that you're particularly interested in as well. So there's lots of options out there in terms of master's programs, and hopefully this gives you a sense of kind of what that can look like. Thanks.
Thank you for listening. That concludes this edition of Action Design Radio, hosted by Eric Johnson and Zarak Khan. All podcast episodes are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and many other platforms where you might typically get your pod on. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Special thanks to Morgan Bortz for design, and as always, we would like to recognize Steve Wendell, founder of the Action Design Network, a nonprofit organization dedicated to spreading awareness about behavioral economics, psychology, and all things behavioral science in order to help you improve your life, your career, and your understanding of the world around us and the people in it. I am your producer and audio engineer, Zach Simon. For more cutting-edge behavioral science content, visit action-design.org. Once again, that's action-design.org. There, you can sign up for our newsletter and find an in-person event happening near you. We have chapters in over a dozen cities in the United States and Canada. Also, on our website, you can find additional notes and links regarding the topics discussed in today's episode. Thank you again for tuning in, and we will see you again soon.